Welcome to Nation's News Update. What if I told you that after years of secrecy, tens of thousands of pages from the Jeffrey Epstein files are now public? And inside those pages are strange handwritten notes, hidden names, and even records of international figures investigators once wanted to question, but never did. Would you want to know who's being protected? Would you want to know why? Stay with us, because the latest revelations in the Epstein case are sparking more questions than answers, and the details we're uncovering may leave you wondering if the full truth will ever come out. Here's what just happened. In New York, a federal judge made a decision that shocked survivors. Two women, described in court documents as possible co-conspirators, will not have their names revealed. The court said this was to protect their privacy and safety. But let me ask you, whose privacy should come first, theirs, or the survivors who've been waiting decades for transparency? Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, FBI Director Kash Patel faced heated questioning. Once again, he repeated the Bureau's position that there is no credible evidence Epstein trafficked victims to others. But under pressure, he admitted he hasn't personally reviewed all 33,000 pages of documents. Think about that for a moment. How can a conclusion be final if the full evidence hasn't been read at the top? Do you trust that explanation, or do you think there's more to the story? And then, the papers themselves. Buried in those thousands of pages is something odd. A 2003 birthday book, compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell. On one page, scrawled across a sketch of a woman's body, are the words, "Happy birthday, may every day be another wonderful secret." What does that mean? Who wrote it? And why does it matter now, in 2025, when survivors are still asking for accountability? Lawmakers have flagged the note for deeper review, and Patel has promised the FBI will look again. But the mystery lingers. At the same time, new disclosures confirm something survivors have long suspected. U.S. investigators wanted to question Prince Andrew after Epstein's death. The Department of Justice considered him at least a witness. But the interview never happened. Why not? Was it diplomacy? Was it evidence? Or was it pressure from behind the scenes? These are today's revelations, but they're only fragments of a much larger story. A story that keeps pulling us back to the same haunting questions. Who is being protected? What truths remain sealed? And how far will survivors have to go to bring everything into the light? If you believe these questions deserve answers, subscribe right now, hit the bell for updates, and let us know in the comments what you think is still being hidden. Together, we'll follow every thread until this puzzle is solved. To understand how we got here, let's take a step back. Jeffrey Epstein's legal troubles began years before most people realized. In 2008, in Florida, he faced charges but reached a controversial deal that allowed him to avoid serious prison time. Critics called it a sweetheart deal. For survivors, it was a betrayal. That moment set the tone for what was to come. A justice system that, in their view, treated Epstein differently from ordinary defendants. Fast forward to 2019. Epstein was arrested again, this time in New York on federal charges. The headlines exploded. Just weeks later, he was found dead in his jail cell. Officials ruled it a suicide. Former Attorney General Bill Barr stood by that ruling. But doubts immediately spread. How could one of the most high-profile detainees in America die under those conditions? Was it negligence, or something more? That single moment gave rise to years of speculation, fueling public suspicion that continues today. And that brings us back to the documents. 33,000 pages from Epstein's estate, now released, provide one of the largest glimpses yet into his world. These are not ordinary files. They include travel logs, bank transfers, flight manifests, handwritten notes, legal correspondence, and more. Think of it as a map of Epstein's reach. Names appear, destinations are logged, financial flows are tracked. But here's the twist. The FBI insists that even in all this, they cannot find credible evidence of Epstein trafficking victims to others. Survivors, however, see patterns that match their own accounts. The gap between official statements and survivor testimony is the heart of this debate. One side says, nothing proven. The other side says, the proof is hiding in plain sight. Kash Patel's testimony this month crystallized that tension. Lawmakers asked, where is the so-called client list? Why has no one else faced charges? Patel answered carefully, saying the Bureau could not corroborate allegations beyond Epstein and his convicted associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. Yet his admission that he hasn't personally reviewed all of the released files became a flashpoint. How can you close the book if the book hasn't been fully read? Survivors reacted with anger. For them, this wasn't just about files, it was about being heard, about not being dismissed, and about seeing justice applied equally, no matter how powerful the names involved. While Washington wrestled with testimony, New York's court delivered its own blow. The judge's decision to keep 2 women's names sealed landed hard with survivors. Imagine waiting decades for transparency, only to see secrecy reinforced again. The judge explained the decision as necessary for privacy and safety, but survivors saw it as another sign that the system bends toward protecting insiders. Here's the question: is it possible to deliver justice while keeping key names hidden? Or does secrecy only deepen mistrust? The international angle adds another layer. Records now confirm that Prince Andrew was on the radar of U.S. prosecutors. After Epstein's death, they sought to interview him as at least a witness, but it never happened. Prince Andrew has denied wrongdoing. He reached a civil settlement in one case, without admitting guilt. But the fact remains, he was identified as someone authorities wanted to question. Why was that request never carried out? Was it diplomacy, lack of cooperation, or quiet pressure from higher levels? Every unanswered question fuels the perception that accountability stops when titles and crowns are involved. But perhaps the most striking shift is happening outside the halls of power. Survivors themselves are stepping into the role of investigators. Virginia Giuffre's family, alongside others, have announced plans to release their own list of Epstein's known associates. Their message is clear: if the government won't do it, survivors will. Supporters hail this as long overdue transparency. Critics warn that releasing names without full due process could cause harm. But the survivors argue they've waited long enough. For them, this isn't about speculation. It's about reclaiming their story. So where does this leave us now? We have tens of thousands of documents. We have testimony from the FBI that insists no credible evidence of others' involvement has been found. We have a court ruling keeping 2 women's names sealed. We have records showing international figures were considered witnesses but never interviewed. And we have survivors pushing forward with their own disclosures. Each development feels like a clue in a larger puzzle. But instead of solving it, each clue only seems to open more questions. Why are some names hidden while others surface? Why do survivors' voices feel sidelined? And who decides how much of the truth the public gets to see? This story matters because it's not only about one man, Jeffrey Epstein. It's about systems of power, of accountability, and of trust in institutions. Survivors argue that the system is still protecting the powerful. Officials argue they are following process. And the public, once again, is caught in the middle, left to wonder, is the truth being revealed, or is it still being managed? That's why we'll continue to cover every filing, every testimony, every ruling. Because stories like this don't just fade away. They demand persistence. They demand eyes that don't look away. And they demand audiences who keep asking the hard questions. If you want fact-based reporting that doesn't flinch, subscribe right now, click the bell for updates, and join the conversation in the comments. Do you believe the FBI's conclusion that no evidence exists of others being involved? Or do you think the truth is still being hidden? The more people who watch, the harder it becomes for this case to be forgotten. This has been Nation's News Update. Thank you for watching, and thank you for standing for the truth.